Hi everyone, thanks for joining me at this presentation today on basically how your body ages and the aging body. We're at the Awakenings Fair in Tarrytown, and it's been a while, right, since we've been exposed to one another. So I'm going to make this one make up for the last presentations I haven't been able to give. I try to give a lot of detail in these talks, mostly because the subjects require, some real conversation. But you'll be able to go to my website at some point over the next couple of weeks and look up the title of the talks, and you'll be able to listen to them again if you like. And there'll be short descriptions as well. Plus all of these topics, I have many videos and lots of free content on my website. The website is drmichaelwald.com. And if you forget that, but somehow remember Blood Detective, that's my other sort of branding, but that might bring you to my Blood Detective supplement website, which will link to the regular site, which again is drmichaelwald.com. If you want to listen to my podcast, they're every Tuesday on any podcast platform, including iTunes. Just search for Ask the Blood Detective. Okay, if you want to reach me by phone, my number is 914-552-1442. All right, so we are talking about aging. This is probably my favorite conversation because I'm interested in anti-aging. I'm interested in looking good. I'm interested in feeling good, but also being able to deal with not feeling good because life is suffering sometimes and it happens. So how we get through that's important, I think. And also being physically fit, being able to do things that bring me joy, whether it's rock climbing or running, which is one of my favorite things to do, and pushing weights, for example, martial arts. So I say this to you because in terms of your goals for aging better, I would want to ask you, if you were a patient of mine, well, what are those goals exactly? Like exactly what are you talking about? So you might ask me that question. I might say, well, I want to age in such a way that by next year's New York Marathon, I want to run it in this time. So I have a specific goal that's out there in the future, which is a pie in the sky, but if I have that out in the future, then I say, well, okay, how am I going to do that? Well, I have to run a certain amount of times per week, right? And then, okay, then the other question should be, well, what kind of running are we talking about? Well, some days it might be just speed running, other times it might just be hills, and other times it's tempo runs, and this is where my heart rate is going to be when I run those different types of running for a particular period of time for a specific goal. So it's important to define as in much detail as you can how it is you want to age, how it is you want to perform, and then have specific goals in mind so that you can structure your daily tasks. The running is at this time, I eat this, I think this way, I meditate here, I take my supplements, so that you're structuring in your day what it takes to fulfill this compelling future that you just laid out for yourself. So what I love about that is that it's one thing to live for the future, which is sometimes considered a bad thing somehow, I don't know, because we're supposed to be in the moment. I'd like to know who said that, because I don't even know what that means. Which moment are we talking about? This one, that one, the other one? But if you've got this vision which is compelling to you, which has got something for you, and you structure your day, again, you take your vitamins here, you run here, you think about this, you do that, then you're living in the present, in the fulfillment of a future, so you get to have your cake and eat it too, so to speak, you see. So that's the key, because most people fail in healthcare and trying to get healthy, not because they were given the wrong advice, although that does happen a lot, but because no one has this conversation about goals. Like if you're gonna open a business, what are you gonna do? You need a business plan, right? So, and that business plan should outline in as much detail as you can what it is you want, by when, and how exactly you're gonna do it, right? How exactly you're gonna do that in business? How exactly you're gonna make that money? How much money are you talking about? So the more detailed that is, the more it will permeate through your consciousness and your nervous system. So that, the choices that you make about your health and how you age are largely psychological. And when I was talking about before, when I said that most people fail in their health endeavors, or they go partway and they stop, it's because they're not grounded well enough. So then what they do is they project. Maybe they'll project on the healthcare provider and say, well, no, he was just too this or too that, and that's why I couldn't stop, or no, that was just too hard, but they never thought to talk to the practitioner about that. So there are these mental games that people don't realize they're playing, on themselves all the time. That's going to be a conversation of another podcast that I do on basically, and yes, this is the title, Why Our Life Sucks. And it's about these wrong ways of thinking and evaluating and projecting and reactions with very little thinking. So we expect to get the most out of nutrition with that, so I try to teach people through my life coaching part of my practice, which is, integrated into the conversations I have, of not just information, but how to actually use that information and how to own it, to truly own it by getting in touch with what it is that you want to do with this, like what is compelling to you. Again, with me, it's, let's say, I love to travel around the world and I run everywhere. I go to places people don't normally go to, and I look, and I think, and I experience life through running. That's a thing that I do. It's a thing that I love to do. So I'm going to Costa Rica soon, and I'll be running on the beach and in the mountains doing all of these things because it's super exciting to me. And I know I needed to be in good shape to do that, so I've been doing certain things every day to do that. And it doesn't become, oh, my vitamins, really? I'm like, give me it, because I'm going to be running in Costa Rica. That's what I'm talking about. If it's compelling like that, you tend to get through difficulties. I'm going to badly paraphrase Nietzsche, the philosopher. He said something like, if you have a strong enough why, you'll figure out the how. So if you have a strong enough why for something, you'll figure it out. You may not have to know, but many people think with this incorrect thinking, if I don't know how to do this, well, I just won't do it. I don't know how to do it. Well, what about learn to do it? Well, I'm too old for that. What does age have to do with thinking? What does age have to do with anything? So all of these misconceptions we have, it's amazing we can even feed ourselves, if you ask me. So let's talk specifically about aging and then what to do about these various aspects of aging. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you guys, is there anything you're here specifically for? So if you're gonna raise your hand and let me know, just be succinct, speak up because of the recording, and is there anything you wanted to add right now? If not, that's fine, because I've got my whole list of things to do. We're good? Okay, that's fine. So here we go. So there are a couple of theories of aging, okay? And interrupt me at any time, by the way. The reason I say that is because if you're working on something and I talk through that, you've missed everything. So ask it, because if you're thinking it, probably others need to get clarification too. So just interrupt me by raising your hand, okay? So one type of aging is called the programmed cell death theory, which means we have genetics, and genetics encodes for certain proteins, and these proteins can upregulate and help many aspects of function, or they can downregulate them. So at a certain part of our lives, there may be certain genes that we've inherited from our parents that just turn on certain ways that allow us to age poorly, let's say, and get disease. And everything from wrinkles to dementia can be genetically related due to programming of our genes. And sometimes, no matter what you do nutritionally, those genes are going to flip those switches on, and that's that. But most of the time, you actually can influence gene expression. And that's through a process called taking advantage of epigenetic factors. All that word means is epi, something on top of the genetics. You're born with these genes. They express differently based on your stress levels, your sleep levels, your diet, your nutritional deficiencies, radiation exposure, toxin exposure, countless number of influences. But certain genes, let's say, like those involved in upregulating the immune system, might be upregulated by, let's say, your intake of red wine and broccoli, let's say. So if you have those things, and I'm just generalizing here, then that can turn on those genes which help your immune system. But if your diet is full of refined and processed sugars, or maybe asparagus, which you're allergic to and you don't know, that will decrease your immune system. So there's no healthy foods per se. There are guidelines, something like, well, plant foods are probably better. That's probably right. But if you need proteins to build your immune system, you're not going to get it from a plant-based diet. Yes, you'll get proteins, of course. You might do that, though, if you add, concentrated forms of, let's say, plant proteins that would help on the diet, or you have to eat an extraordinary amount of plant foods. Let's say to get the proteins enough so you don't waste away to nothing if you're going to run, or you want to lift weights and have some muscles, or you want to build your immune system. Certain diets may be more or less effective for that. But we're taught, no, plant-based is better because it's plant-based, and that's it. But having said that, so there's this programmed aging perspective. And then there is the endocrine theory of aging. So that basically is also known as the hormone decline theory. The theory is that as we grow older, hormones diminish over time. And hormones stimulate cellular repair, they reduce inflammation, they control the upregulation and downregulation of genes, and they affect inflammation, as I mentioned, and oxidative stress. They impact how we digest foods, how we repair tissues. So if our hormones are declining, then we're going to age differently, obviously. Some of us age much more rapidly than others. And even an individual from year to year or week to week even, or decade to decade, can age very differently over a period of time. I had one patient that said, what's with this shoulder? And I looked at the x-ray, and there's a lot of arthritic changes in there. And I said, well, your shoulder, your right shoulder is aging much more than your left shoulder. It's probably 15 years older. So different parts of your body age differently as well. Now, but there are very interesting ways in natural medicine and traditional medicine to actually estimate your biological aging in certain areas. So for example, I have a mechanical device. It's an FDA-approved technology, which measures the biological age of your arteries, your entire cardiovascular system, and various aspects of it. So if I have a 50-year-old and I do this test and it's 75 years old, it shows that their arteries have the stiffness of the average 75-year-old person, even though they're 50. So with cardiovascular disease, I'm obviously doing that test all the time, because if the nutrition is going to work, it has to reduce the biological age. The person can say, I feel great, they can look better. But if you're not fixing what you need to fix, you're not fixing what you need to fix, you see. So that's an example. So our body ages differently, and these so-called different aging theories, they're not different. It's not even accurate to say they're interrelated. They're the same thing. The hormones are not in some one compartment of your body away from the programmed cell death theory or the oxidation theory. So let me go a little bit further, and then I'll back up and talk practically about these. So I mentioned this programmed cell death theory, which is the genetic factors that affect health, which is influenced by your environment and your genetics, obviously. And then there's the hormone or endocrine decline theory. That's hormones diminishing, causing aging like crazy. So when women hit, let's say, menopause, perimenopause, their estrogen levels tank, which they have been going down for a while, and then finally they go, the brain starts to shrink, and memory becomes bad. Estrogen will also, lack of it will tend to slow metabolic rate, so they become fatter, they gain more weight. And there's an increased risk of certain cancers, there's a decreased risk of other cancers. So if a person is not aging properly, then all hell can break loose. And then there's the immunological theory of aging, which basically means as you age, your immune system decreases. Now we talked earlier about the immune systems, because there are many immune systems, but for the purpose of this conversation, we'll just say immune system. But if a practitioner says to you, listen, this is the best thing for your immune system, you should say, which immune system are we talking about? Is it the cell-mediated immune system, which does very well with, let's say, vitamin C? The complement immune system, not so much. And then the human immune system needs protein as basic stuff. So generally speaking, you need to support all of the immune systems because they're all yours. So when people say to me, like many people just did today, they said, Dr. Wald, so what's your protocol for this? What do you do for this? What do you do for this? I might have general notions of certain things that I might do, but my philosophy is I give you what you need for your needs. So that means I have to determine that through questioning, through laboratory testing, because if all of you had, let's say, the same cancer, God forbid, because of your genetics, what medications you may or may not be on, what other health conditions that you may have, what likes or dislikes the different foods that you might have, what your stress level is like, what your hydration is like, what your toxin exposure is like, electromagnetic radiation is like, all these factors, you'll have different chemistry and different nutritional needs, same cancer. Of course, there's no such thing as the same cancer. Even among one person to the same person in a week or a month, the cancer changes. But medicine, we compartmentalize it, we generalize it way too much. And when you generalize treatments for people, they always become less effective because they're not personalized. So when colleagues of mine and I used to do this too, it said, well, I'm going to treat you as an individual, except I didn't know what that meant. Where's that translating? How am I doing that? Well, if I have testing that tells me, well, you have a biological age of your arteries of 75, I can treat that person's thing. If you malabsorb by 33%, then I can help you with that. You see, if you have a vitamin C excess causing oxidation, which it does, every nutrient, by the way, has a reverse effect. That means at one level, let's say vitamin A, If you're deficient, you might have night blindness. If it's excessive, you might be blind. If your vitamin C is at the right level, it acts as an antioxidant. When it's at the wrong level orally, it acts as an oxidant, the exact opposite. The word antioxidant is a misnomer. It's a term that's just wrong, because you might take a certain nutrient and I can measure your urine for oxidative stress, and it would tell me that you're taking an amount of vitamin C that's causing oxidation in your body. Now, if you had cancer, that would be okay, because intravenous vitamin C at those high doses is not an antioxidant, it's an oxidant. It's an oxidant. It's supposed to be a bad word. Now, if you don't believe me, Google intravenous vitamin C in cancer. Go to the scholarly articles that pop up and read any one of them. They will tell you in the first paragraph exactly what I just told you. Even the practitioners that I know, as I consult these practices that give IV vitamin C, they don't even know this. And if they don't know that, that means they can't check the oxidative stress level. How the heck do they know they're giving the right vitamin C or anything? They cannot know. It's impossible. So, how often should I get intravenous nutrition? They'll ask me. Well, it depends on how long your body holds on to the nutrition. So I need to check some levels of things every 2 days or 3 days or 5 days or 2 weeks. And when they start going down, I can say, you need it right there. And then you need it here when it tends to dip. Not 2 weeks later. So we want to be specific for each person. So you figure out what a person's needs are. And in the context of aging, there are certain markers that help us predict aging. So one I mentioned is, it's called the cardiobeam. It tells you the biological age of the cardiovascular system. It uses electric current that goes through the finger, goes to the small capillaries in the finger, then it goes to the larger blood vessels. It hits all the blood vessels. Not a single millimeter is missed unless there's a clot just blocking the way. It'll bounce off the walls of the tubes. If the tubes are hard from arteriosclerosis and oxidative stress and calcium deposits, then the waveform bounces very fast off that. But if it's soft, it bounces differently off the walls, and then that's fed back to the computer and calculates the biological age. Again, there's so much more that this test does, but that's one example of figuring out how you are actually aging. If you just base it on how you feel, again, I've given examples today. Look, I felt great in high school. I was on the track team. I had broken a 2-mile record, and then the next day I couldn't walk up the stairs. I couldn't see out of my left eye. I had multiple sclerosis symptoms, plaquing, the whole 9 yards. I felt amazing. I not only felt amazing before that, I thought I was indestructible. First of all, I was a teenager, and I was doing all this running. And so we can't just rely on how we feel. And we are so inundated with that incorrect concept that if you feel well, you're well. So why do they call stroke the silent killer? Because you're fine one day and then you're gonna have a stroke. And now with medicine and its ability to have you live longer, well, here's what's happening with things like cardiovascular disease. People are getting strokes, oh yeah. They're surviving them because of medical intervention, which sounds like a good thing, except they're disabled like crazy. I have one of my sisters who, she's passed, but she lived in another state, and she had multiple strokes. She never would let me work with her. It was just one of those things. And after one stroke, she was just completely debilitated. But she survived, and most people maybe 5 years ago would have died. And then there was another one, and certainly many more people would have, but she survived, and she was just more and more disabled. What a horrible life, that is. So we're living longer statistically. We're mostly living longer because we've reduced the infant mortality rate. So fewer infants are dying, and that artificially increases the length of life. But we are living longer than, let's say, 200 years ago. That's absolutely certain. But we're living longer with multiple diseases, not even one. It's usually several things. And the problem with that, obviously, is that it will affect our quality of life, and certainly the quality of life during our last few decades. We want to be the best, but it's generally the worst. If you have a plan, though, specific ways in which you want to counteract that, it doesn't guarantee anything, but it absolutely increases the probability of you doing well. If you have high cholesterol and you lower your cholesterol, then you probably have reduced your risk of stroke and heart attack by a certain amount. That is pretty much shown. And then if you add exercise to that, whatever the right exercise is for you, and if you reduce your stress and you learn proper coping mechanisms to manage stress, you're going to diminish your risk more and more and more and more and more. And you would do that because you have a plan that you will consistently follow through with, that you check from time to time the labs to make sure it's keeping up and predicting things correctly. So some biomarkers to predict how your aging is: inflammatory markers that can be measured, immune markers, okay? So because inflammation, we know, degenerates the body. It turns the genes on in all the wrong directions. It breaks down tissue. So our bodies break down. Let me put it to you this way. Patients say to me, well, Dr. Wald, you know, I'm getting old, and I guess this is because I'm old. You know, how old are you? 57? I'm like, okay, I'm 55. So we both have very different goals. So and they assume it's aging. It's how you're aging, yes, but why do you think that's how aging is? Well, there's nothing left. They haven't thought of that, even that. People are so superficial. See, I'm generalizing. Some people can be so superficial, they don't, with their thinking, that they lose out on quality of life because they just don't think. So, inflammatory markers, body composition testing, that's a test where you put some stickers on your hand and foot, sends a current through you, goes through muscle, water, and fat at different rates, because muscle is more dense than fat, fat's more dense than water, gives you a number of your metabolic rate, and whatever you do to improve your health and your longevity, and to more favorably manage these different aging theories we're going to talk about, from the hormone decline to the programmed cell death theory to the oxidative stress theory, if you increase your lean mass, you have been successful. Your lean mass is your organ and your lean muscle. So if you have an increase in those two things, that is associated with not just a longer life, but a longer life during the non-disability stages of life. That's the key thing right there. The other thing would be, well, there are certain anti-aging sort of tests, you might say, that regular doctors can do, although they don't know they're anti-aging tests, like cholesterol and homocysteine, C-reactive protein, vitamin D3 levels, for example. The higher normal your vitamin D, the higher normal, the lower your risk of developing chronic disease in the first place, the longer you tend to offset all those diseases. And those diseases include diabetes, arthritis, autoimmune disease, cancer, those types of things, infections, okay? And yes?
What's a high normal in your book?
The high normal for D3, that's a good question. So the range is usually between 30 and 100. 50 is average of the bell curve. Most men and women are at 50, so they determine that that's the optimal. That's just the average. And the average person my age looks like crap and has terrible health, can't do anything. You know, they can't do anything but sit and eat. You know, they do that really well, so I have to give them some credit. I'm just trying to lighten this up a little bit. So the optimal level of D3 is anywhere between 70 and 100.
Oh my gosh.
You know it's too high not if it's over 100 so much, but if you have too much vitamin D, it causes hypercalcemia and causes hepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver. If that happens, and by the way, I've seen it one time in 29 years. I've only seen it once. And that was on the person who was taking cod liver oil, which is loaded with vitamin A and D, and that's how these nutrients got a bad name, because in the 40s and 50s, people were dying of too much vitamin A and D, so they said these are bad nutrients. So they're not bad nutrients, they're just used badly by people. You see, that's what happened. So if your calcium is too high, your liver enzymes are too high, the person should stop taking the vitamin D. You check the levels again in 2 weeks, they're usually normal at that point. Then you start again at a lower level. So it's not like your head's gonna explode, okay? I've seen that though, whose head's exploding from vitamin D. Then we have the rate of living theory, which is interesting. The rate means the rate of your metabolic rate. So as you age, your metabolic rate tends to trend down. So a lower metabolic rate tends to result in more fat retention, and that increases your risk of multiple diseases, everything from cancer to diabetes to hypertension to strokes to heart attacks. And since overweight is an inflammatory condition, and since all diseases cause from inflammation, you name it, anything can happen. And so as the metabolic rate diminishes, we also do not put on lean mass on the body as well as we did when we were younger. Again, the lean mass is the organs and the muscles. Everything else is fat and water. Fat and water, for the purpose of this conversation, don't do anything, okay? It's not exactly true, obviously, but the metabolic rate lives in the lean mass, which is the organs. And as we age, they atrophy, as I've mentioned a couple of times, they shrink. That's called sarcopenia or muscle wasting. The higher rates of sarcopenia are associated with early death from anything. So increased risk of all-cause morbidity mortality is how it's referred to. And then we have a cross-linking theory of aging. That means in your body there are protein structures. When aging happens in unfavorable ways, they break down and they cross-link. Like a brown spot on your skin, that's cross-linking. So you have brown spots on your skin, that's cross-linking proteins, which are proteins that kind of like a garden hose you leave out in the sun that gets like super hard and starts to crack. That's exactly what happens in your body.
What about when you have white spots?
White spots are maybe different things, depending on the person who has the white spots. Might be lack of melanin there. It could be involved in any number of conditions, actually. And when you have these brown spots, though, the brown spots on your body are proportional to the spots in your brain. So when you see brown spots in your hands, you've got cross-linking on your hands, which is one tissue, and then you have cross-linking in your brain, or cross-linking in your blood vessels, or wherever else. So the cross-linking, like a lot of these theories, are managed based upon finding out what the individual needs for their aging process, and then doing some of these tests to see how you can personalize it for that individual, okay? So that's the cross-linking theory of aging. The more cross-links you have, the worse you age, the more disease that you have. And then there's the free radical theory, which means that the body produces free radicals, which are highly reactive molecules. They bounce around like pinballs, you know, in a pinball machine. You remember what those were, right? Okay. I was just in California. I was playing, pinball for the first time in like years. It was fun. No electronics. It was awesome. But that reminded me of free radicals, because these free radical molecules are made in your body, or you consume them in different foods that you eat, like rancid oils, for example, and they just dismantle biological reactions, is what they do. Now here's the key thing to realize about all these theories, because you don't have to memorize them. They're all the same. You can't have one without the other happening. It just doesn't happen that way. It may be more or less obvious that things are happening and then other things are not until they happen. But for example, if you have hormones that are declining, you will tend to oxidize more. You'll make more free radicals. And that can affect how your genes are programming themselves, or program cell death, which affects the immune system. So we've just reviewed like all of the theories of aging right there that we have. But it's really important to recognize that with a person, when I deal with a person, I'm trying to say, okay, how is this person aging? Is it more in this category than another? Then that might be important to know, so you can focus more on that weakness. Just like if you hurt your shoulder, you focus on your shoulder in a way that you reduce its stress until it heals, or you do what you're gonna do. You increase your nutrition, maybe get PT, you do some exercises. So the one thing you wanna just wrap up and realize is that you can't avoid aging. Obviously, we're all gonna age, we're all gonna die of something. But for most of the causes of death, the major causes of death, they can be delayed significantly. Some can be almost entirely avoided in your lifetime. And the quality of how you actually age can be affected in dramatic ways. So much so that Harvard, one of the team leader of research, whose name is escaping me at the moment, there was a book that he produced that was a New York Times bestseller within the last 2 years. And he noted in there how the definition of aging has now changed. They now consider aging a treatable disease. If I said that 5 years ago, they would take my license away. You can't anti-age, gone, license gone. Well, we know you can't anti-age, but we can reduce various factors that we associate with aging, like high cholesterol, like weakened renal function. Your kidneys, by the way, are one of the weakest organs, evolutionarily speaking, in your body. If you're gonna bet on which organ's gonna go first, that's the one that usually goes first. And medicine has terrible treatments for it. But we know that we can offset the loss of renal function or any of these anti-aging factors through some fundamental considerations. Now I say considerations because these may not apply to you. There are considerations to see if they apply to you. One is looking at the total caloric intake of your diet. Generally speaking, if you have fewer calories, you should age better, but not if you're malnourished. And if you're fasting all the time for 14 hours, well, it's great. But if you have all these problems and you're not taking advantage of them, and you psychologically feel that you feel better on fasting all the time, well, and unless they're improving your lean body mass, they're not improving your aging. And most of the time, people are doing it completely wrong. They're losing lean mass all the time. It makes me crazy. Okay. Another thing is to look at your oxidative stress levels, because we know that the oxidative stress theory says that the higher your levels of oxidants, the worse you age everywhere. So there's a marker in the urine called malonyl dialdehyde, or MDA, which is an oxidant marker. If that level is high, you need to do what you need to do to lower it, and make sure that that's actually getting low. Not that, again, as I keep saying, that you're feeling better. Feeling better is great. If you're feeling better and the oxidants go down, the inflammatory mediators go down, your malabsorption reduces, all the different markers, your biological aging of your vascular system improves, that is actual anti-aging right there. Okay? Questions to ask right now so far? Okay? Okay. Any question about any particular condition or disease relative to aging? Yes?
Osteoporosis.
Okay, that's a good one. And it's one that most of us don't think about, particularly men, because it's one of the rare cases in medicine where it's much more, with women you're talking about osteoporosis all the time, and with men you're not. And with heart disease, you're talking more about men all the time, and in women you're thinking it's anxiety. This is what medicine does. But with osteoporosis, it's a very common problem. It's mostly never caused by calcium deficiency. That was never true, ever. It's caused by inflammation. That inflammation can be caused by many things, like hormones declining, or increased oxidative stress, or programmed cell death problems you see, or malnutrition. But when you lose bone density, there's an inflammatory reaction that pulls calcium out of your bones. Your body says, where am I gonna stick this calcium? I'll stick it in the arteries, makes hardening of the arteries. Sticks the calcium in the breast tissue, causing calcium-laden breast cysts, which are precursors to breast cancer. Puts it in the brain, interferes with thinking, denatures the brain because you have calcium deposits. Your body will flood the tissues with calcium, and you might have muscle stiffness, what feels like joint aches and pains, fibromyalgia type symptoms are all towards calcium. Calcium is, inflammation is like a magnet for calcium. So you can take all the calcium you want. In fact, what that'll do is you'll probably lose more calcium, because the more you take in, the body tends to excrete more. And if you have inflammation causing your bone loss and you're eating calcium, you're just gonna make that worse. You're gonna increase your risk of all the other conditions I just mentioned because of the reason I just mentioned them. And those conditions I just mentioned would seem to make perfect sense, right? Lose calcium from bone, put calcium in the tissue, put calcium in the joints, right? We know that any one of those conditions increases the risk of either one because they're related. Of course they're related, everything's related. Some things are more directly related than others. So what do you do about calcium loss? That depends on the cause. Maybe it's caused from estrogen deficiency, or dehydroepiandrosterone or adrenal hormone deficiency. Maybe it's caused because you're malabsorbing your calcium, or you have low stomach acid or no stomach acid. So when you eat your calcium, the stomach acid is supposed to ionize it, turn it on, so the ionized calcium knows where to go. But if it's non-ionized, your body just sticks it everywhere. Okay? These are not holistic concepts. They are not my original concepts either. This is actually basic stuff in medicine. But it takes a long time for these ideas to go from textbooks and research to medical practice. I read a book about that where they talked about medical discoveries and the delay to get them into general knowledge. The stethoscope, for example, to listen to the heart, that was around 50 years before it was actually used. The cure for scurvy, 75 years before they started using it on a regular basis. So medicine knows all this stuff, but only now they're getting the slightest notion, oh, inflammation, okay, great. What are you gonna do about it? Nothing. What do? It's like a goal for our health. Okay, so you have new information comes in. What is a scientist supposed to do? You don't ignore it. The more nutrition science coming out, these doctors are like, no, it can't work, and they rationalize it away. Just like human beings do, they rationalize things in and out. But what a scientist is supposed to do is be flexible in his or her theories. So if new information comes out about inflammation or hormone decline theory of inflammation, you question what you know, you adjust it based on new information, because you're not supposed to be the one making all the decisions, you're supposed to be the one who's representing it. But when you speak to your doctors or your practitioners, even to me, you are only getting at best a filter of all that. All the biases and all that stuff is right there. So unless you can become, as I like to say on my podcast, your own blood detective, you need a little knowledge. Yes, it's gonna take a little work. You've learned harder things than this, I'm promising you. You only need to know a tiny bit of this stuff so you can start to ask the right kinds of questions. Just like each of you has your expertise in different areas of like your work, right? And you know when someone's bullshitting you. They'll say something and they'll like, what kind of question? They clearly don't know what they're talking about, but you know what the right questions are to ask. So you know this, but you can't know that unless you have some fundamental base, you see. So the podcast that I do and the videos are all towards getting you to think and giving you the actual information that I know you need, because I've been doing this 29 years. I know what all the questions are, not all, but I know most of the questions. I've heard them before. I know what the doctors tend to say who are anti-against it. I know where those errors are, but that's fine for me. And I do try to teach it to my clients too. I do a whole sort of lesson thing like this. I'll have a board up in my my office a whiteboard, and I'm drawing and writing these things, so it's a learning experience, you know? And then each time I see the person, I summarize the prior conversation in maybe, not the 20 minutes it might have took, but 5 minutes. So they get it, oh yeah, I heard it again, and then we add on. And then by the time you're done, you've heard that term, right? That saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, feed him for a lifetime. So if I fix you up, that's great, but what happens when that starts to decay because of your aging? If you know nothing, how are you going to take daily steps to reach your goals? You need to know what to do. And what to do changes. Sorry, it's just the nature of the universe. This is why holistic medicine is more right than regular medicine, in the sense that holistic health is more open-minded. It recognizes multiple influences and realizes that any separateness that we apply to anything is just a construction of our minds. It does not exist anywhere but in our interpretation. So in general semantics, which is the study of the meaning of meaning, which I love to study, they say that the best way of thinking, if there is a best way, is to think in a way that's consistent with how the universe actually works. So in the universe, it's not just here and there, there's everything. Thank you. So if you believe that, then you would look at a person's health very differently. Regular physicians might say, listen, well, you know, you don't have this, and so it's got to be that. Yeah, but what about all this in between? There's a lot in there, infinitesimal opportunities to improve a person. But if you don't think that way and you're into dualistic thinking, that's a problem. You know, that's literally like a child I mentioned earlier. They are black and white thinkers, children. You know, it's either this or that. They don't get subtleties, you see. But when those people grow up and they're not taught that, that's an actual infantile way of thinking of the universe, and it's absolutely wrong. As a filter to your life, you're going to have some problems. Then there's some problems. And that, of course, is true in terms of natural health. So real quickly, with my diagnosis of MS that I had when I was 18, I just refused to believe that was going to do me in. There's just no way. I just refused to believe it. And I also took certain steps that attitude gave me and developed a sort of open-mindedness that I filled in with information that I made practical for me, and I got a good outcome. It doesn't guarantee, if you think more correctly, that your outcome will go the way you want, but it does increase the probability of that. It's not so much what you're doing, supplements, foods, exercise, it's who you are doing it. And knowing that you change all the time, because there's nothing's stagnant, nothing is ever the same, right? That's a Buddhist concept, life is impermanent. That's a philosophy that's consistent with what the universe seems to be. But if we think the universe is, let's say, permanent, that's saying it's somehow structured, and in one way. It's not one way. We have evidence for that, you know, in quantum mechanics, for example. We know that even if you do the same thing every day, so we bring it down to real life. Dr. Wald, I did the same thing, you know, for the last month. Why is this happening? Because you're not the same. You're not aging the same. And what do you mean by the same thing? Well, I ate an apple every day. Was it the same apple? Were you the same eating that apple? What other foods did you eat that day that might have had your body deal with that apple differently? How were you thinking that day? Did you exercise that day? Did you take your meds that day? You know, so the point is to realize that there are ways of figuring out a more structured, useful way of improving your health in terms of how your body ages, but you have to understand certain concepts about the aging process. It can be affected positively. Medicine forever until just recently, and still pretty much now in terms of practice, believes you can't do anything about it for the most part, other than treat acute or chronic diseases the way you're treating it. But we know now that that's not true. And natural people have seemed to know this forever. You know, they know that when you have disease, the energy in the body tends to be reduced. That was just a concept in natural health. But now we can actually measure it. And that's the criteria that science needs to measure it. And there's something to that, you know, because if you can have a way of thinking that predicts something over and over again, there might be some truth into that. And that's why the scientific way of thinking is a good way of approaching this. But most scientists don't think scientifically. They certainly don't in their own lives, you know. So, to summarize, a question? Yeah.
What's standing with the shortening of the telomere?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's another theory known as the telomere shortening theory of aging. And what that means is that if you have a cell, well, you have your genes at your chromosomes, and then the chromosomes have a tail. That's called the telomere. As you age, the telomere shortens and shortens and shortens and shortens. So anything that improves the length of the telomere or stops it or mitigates its shortening is a good thing from an anti-aging perspective. Oxidative stress will shorten the telomere. Hormones declining will shorten the telomere. Deficiency of antioxidants will shorten the telomere. Immune deficiency will shorten the telomere. So it's not like it was when it came out where, oh, we have it now, it's a telomere, that's aging. Well, that's fine, but stressful thoughts cause the telomere to shorten. So it's really just another sort of perspective you're looking at, and then you might want to measure that, let's say, but it's not a very useful marker in general clinical practice because of so many influences on the body, meaning on the telomere. So what do? You give a person what they need for their needs through various testing and questioning, and then if you felt like looking at these individual aging markers like telomere shortening, you could. But we do know that in studies, zinc, melatonin, N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C, resveratrol, and a few other nutrients have been shown to slow the shortening of the telomere and even lengthen it. And again, these theories are not separate. They're just theories so we can think about them. Just like in medical school, they say this is the anatomy class, this is the chemistry class, this is the physiology class, this is this. Yes, but this is all the body, you see. But we forget because we're educated that way. We think people are in parts, and we think that they have systems, but that is not right. Any of that compartmentalization, as I've said earlier on, is artificial. Okay. So I think that's going to end it for now, and we have another talk coming on very soon. So if you want to reach me, or you want a copy of this video, or you want to enter into the book drawing, just put your name on the list, write neatly, please. And you can also reach me at drmichaelwalt.com. That's the website, drmichaelwalt.com. And if you go to info@blooddetective.com, that's my email. I answer all my emails myself. And my phone number is 914-552-1442. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.